Hello everyone and welcome to the first episode of what we're calling as Just FYI Podcast.
So
That's
little
formal
bit,
by the way, that's formal.
I think you get out of a bubble that you're in. So I think that definitely made an impact in the way I think, the way I see the world.
I think you and me have been discussing this for a very long time, I know, and I think then Caroline was also telling me that you guys also had some sort of discussion for organizing this kind of space. Yeah, by the way, it's 11 p.m. for us in India, so it's pretty odd time that way. Yeah, we're doing this first podcast late at night, but yeah, I think it's a good There was this movie, right? Swades, Shah Rukh Khan's. It's a very famous movie. So it shows, no, he comes back to India, he feels attached, and then he's like, I want to do something for my village, for my people, for my country, right? So how often that is true? Is that really Swades moment?
I won't say that I've not had second thoughts about exiting the space because it is challenging.
Come to that part, Ekta, we'll come to that part.
I have to do something for this country. I have to do something. But the reality, creeps back. So I was not aware of, I unlearned a lot of things while I was learning a lot of things.
Hello everyone and welcome to the first episode of what we're calling as Just FYI Podcast. My name is Rishabh. I'm founder of a social impact consulting firm called The Analyst, and we are based out of Bhopal in Madhya Pradesh, the central India region. And we have been planning about this podcast for a very long time, and Ekta is aware of this part. We have been thinking of creating a sort of platform, a group, a collective where we all can come in. Folks from development sector can come in and share their experiences, journeys, whatever our experiences have been so far. But I think we were lucky enough to get this ready, and today we are doing the first episode with two wonderful people. So I'm joined with my colleague Diya, and our guests for tonight is Ekta and Caroline. So Caroline is based out of Canada, and Ekta is based out of Bangalore. And this is going to be like a really fun chit chat kind of a thing. So I'm not going into the formal introductions of both our guests for tonight. So I'll request Ekta and Caroline to take it forward, introduce yourself, and then yeah, let's get on with that. Then over to you, Ekta.
Okay, hello. Hi, Diya, Rishabh, Caroline, and good to be here. Also, thank you for having me on the episode, and I hope this goes well. So a
That's
little bit,
formal, by the way. That's formal.
so a little bit about me. So I'm based out of Bangalore. I've been here for over a decade now, and Bangalore is home. I started my journey in the development space. It's been about close to 5 years now, and been very exciting. It started when I did my master's at Azim Premji University, and Caroline was my batchmate, and that's where we also met. After that, I was with a civic journalism platform for about 3.5 years. Also did an editorial fellowship with a development magazine, and then did some independent consulting. And at present, I'm working at Satwa Consulting in Bangalore on a collective impact project called Samohika Shakti. And I think after all this while, like things are really tying up what I studied at university, all my experience, what I wanted to personally pursue. So that's a little bit about me. Carol.
Well, hi everyone. My name is Caroline Wilson. I am currently working as a policy analyst with the federal government of Canada. I started my development journey actually back in undergrad. I did my bachelor's in sociology honors from Xavier's, Mumbai. And that's when we had something called as a social impact program, and which was based on the idea that you can do some voluntary initiative. So either you can teach or you can go to an orphanage. Is it me or is there an echo? Because I think there is
No,
a
it's fine now.
feedback.
It's fine now.
You can hear? Okay, perfect. So yeah, during my undergrad, I had the opportunity to sort of go to an orphanage and like teach some kids there. And that's when I learned that, okay, this is a space that I really like because I can see an impact being made. And that's how I took sociology as my final year. Like that's what I graduated with. And then I did my master's in development, and that's where I met Ekta. We did a couple of field work, field trips together where we did. It was called field immersion, and we went into rural India. We stayed with rural families, and I think that kind of changed the perspective that you have about life in general, but also and I think you get out of a bubble that you're in. So I think that definitely made an impact in the way I think, the way I see the world. So I knew that that was a space I wanted to be in. But life took its turn. I was working with a gender initiative initially, and then the pandemic hit. I kind of switched the gears a bit. So then I went into international academic programs. I had a project that I was doing with IIT Madras. That's when I got into policy space. And I'll talk more about it as we get into the episode. But and that's when I was like, okay, I really want to get into the policy space because I like that more than I like what I was doing initially. And that's how I did my master's at McGill in public policy, and now I'm here.
Thank you so much, Ekta and Caroline. Diya, do you want to go next?
Yeah, so hi everyone, and I am like kind of a newbie in this sector, I would say, because I've just graduated from Symbiosis. I did my economic honors from there. And as like Caroline said, I quite understand that feeling, like going into rural India, getting out of that bubble. So the moment that I decided that I have to go in this sector was at that time only. I went for a project in rural India, rural Maharashtra basically. So there I realized I was doing primary research there, and that time I realized that I should go in for this. And after graduation, I joined TA as a research associate, and it's been like 5 or 6 months now. So yeah, it's going great. So that is it for me.
No, and I think Ekta, the interesting thing is it's because of Diya this is happening because I think you and me have been discussing this for a very long time. I know, and I think then Caroline was also telling me that you guys also had some sort of discussion for organizing this kind of space. But I think thanks to Diya for taking a lead on this and getting all this concept ready, and finally we are here today. So yeah, by the way, it's 11 p.m. for us in the India, so it's pretty odd time that way. Yeah, we're doing this first podcast late at night, but yeah, I think it's a good a group today. So I think just for the audience and also for our guest, we had like a very formal topic to this discussion, which we named as diving into social development, expectations versus reality. But I think as also from our introduction, this is quite clear that we all made some kind of decision as to why we want to jump into the sector, and then we started our journeys from there on. So maybe this is for you and Ekta and Caroline, for you to kind of answer. But yeah, it's more like, so I think what they also said, what Caroline was also saying, it's more like there was this movie, right? Swades, Shah Rukh Khan's. It's a very famous movie. So it shows, no, he comes back to India, he feels attached, and then he's like, I want to do something for my village, for my people, for my country, right? So how often that is true? Because for me, I'll tell you, it was never that kind of a scenario, because I did my law, and law, unfortunately, India doesn't have to do much with the development space, right? Today, many people still see law as a very conventional field in that way, like you go to courts, you practice, and that's it. But I think for me, it was never that I went to a village and then I thought, okay, maybe this is my calling. It never happened that way. But yeah, maybe for you and Dia, that was the story. So I just wanted to understand from you guys, like, is that really Swades moment that you guys kind of got into, and then you said, Kini, yaar, we want to do development sector, or is it much more than that? And I think APU was the first universities at those times, and they started this social impact course and things like that, because I think not many universities at that time were giving this development education and things like that. So Ekta, Caroline, like, what are your thoughts on that?
Ekta, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So for me, I didn't have a okay. So Swades is going to complete 20 years this December since it's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
uh,
Yeah, yeah.
so I didn't have a Swades moment. I think I grew up in an environment in Delhi. with my family, and both my parents have been involved very closely working with communities and social causes. So I grew up seeing value in doing that. While I have to admit, I also wanted to, I think, climb the corporate ladder and be a boss woman and maybe have my, like, be a CEO of a successful company. I grew up with those dreams. But I think as life gets a little like we gain clarity in life, it becomes easier to know what we want to do. For me, I think the turning point really was when I did my bachelor's in I did a triple major in economics, sociology, and political science from Christ University. While I wanted to pursue economics, I realized that it's a little heavy for me. But I also realized that my undergrad was very practical oriented, very theoretical, a lot of theories and everything. And while all that made sense, I passed all subjects and everything. I didn't know how to make sense of it, because there was no connect with the ground or the field, right? Which is why I was like, if I've invested 3 years, I need to dive a little bit more deeper and understand practically what all of this means. Fortunately, I think Azim Premji University was like at that time really rigorously kind of doing their outreach, and I made it in. And I think that was the best decision of my life because, like Caroline was saying, that these field immersions that we did in rural India, in Bangalore itself, I think that was very eye opening because we were able to connect whatever theoretically we have learned and see it into practice. And often there is a disconnect. And I think that itself is a reason why we come into this space to bridge these gaps that exist. And we can't do it alone. It's not a one man effort, it's always a collective effort. But that one person who has that drive to do this can always like get an army with them, kind of have that ripple effect, inspire people, or be a part of organizations that who are already doing this. So I think for me, that was really the reason why I got into this space. I won't say that I've not had second thoughts about exiting this space because it is challenging. Uh, for all reasons, right?
We'll come to that part, Ekta. We'll come to that part.
Caroline, you can go ahead.
Yeah, Rishabh, it's funny that you brought Swades as an example because while growing up, I definitely loved that movie, and I think after I watched that movie, like for 2 days after that, I'm like, I have to do something for this country. I have to do something. But the reality, creeps back. So you realize your limitations. You're not Shah Rukh Khan, so you got to figure out your life as well, as much as you want to make an impact. Um, for me, I think for me, the space in itself, like I said, it started in undergrad. But while I was doing undergrad, I also realized that especially Xavier's is a space where you have very very similar people from similar socioeconomic background who come in. Our conversations are very similar. Our perspectives are similar. So even when you have discussions, whether it's on caste, whether it's on religion, whether it's on gender, it's limited because you don't have too much of variety in those discussions. But that really changed when I joined APU because I now was exposed to a crowd that was not only diverse in its demography, but also the kind of experiences people had, the identities people brought forward. And I'm lucky that we were one of the few groups where we could have safe spaces where we could have conversations that were really eye-opening for me in a manner because I grew up in a very protected environment. So I was not aware of, like, I unlearned a lot of things while I was learning a lot of things. So I think that in itself was a great experience for me. And I think the reason I even chose development studies was because I was like, okay, I want to, from whatever I understood in my undergrad, I was like, okay, that's a space that seems very interesting. But when I got into APU is when I realized the challenges associated with that space. And I think as much as it made me understand my privileges, it was also really nice to have people who told you how to be allies, who showed you spaces which you were not aware of before, where to talk, where not to talk, like small things, but that makes a great impact, I think. And I think that was definitely my experience of Like, I think that's what made an impact for me to get into the space even more. So yeah.
Excellent. And I think like a few days back, I was in this one event that APU was organizing. So I think APU, TIS, and maybe few other universities are focusing so much on development studies are having that kind of impact which you both are also sharing, right? Because for me, I was studying in a university where this kind of culture was not there, right? And to be honest, till the end of my law, I was not aware that there's something called as APU, or there's something called as development studies, right? And I think that was also the reason why, after studying law, I was clear that I don't want to go into court and do the traditional practice. But beyond that, I was not actually aware that okay, there's something called as development sector, or there's something called as public policy and things like that. So I think that way APU and TES and few other institutes have done some excellent job, I feel. And I don't know if Diya, you have like a different sort of take on that, because I think Symbiosis that way is also not very much into development education, but I think TIS and APU are two outstanding academic institutes, at least right now in India. I feel that. So yeah. So yeah, Diya, do you want to like kind of jump in?
Yeah, so actually, Symbiosis had the same story. There were like a kind of a group of people with same opinions, talking about same kind of things, similar opinions. And that is when I got that a project opportunity. And after that, I also got an internship opportunity. Both of them I had to go to a very rural area, and I saw the reality. And I've never seen that thing because I've lived in Dehradun since like my birth, and I've never been to these places. And my parents are also from here, so I've never seen that actual reality of these places. So when I went there, it was actually a shocker for me, and that disconnect that I felt, that things were there on the paper, it was there, these things are getting implemented there, but when I reached there, it was kind of a shocker that a lot of people didn't even know things existed. So that actually made me realize that I can do something for this and I really need to get into this sector. And otherwise, I also had the same plan, that getting into that corporate ladder and going somewhere there in that line. But then with my internship and projects, I just totally changed it. So yeah.
Great. So I think there's also one excellent thing that Caroline mentioned, like, where you just said that maybe spaces like APU give that freedom to kind of meet people from diverse backgrounds and kind of understand where people are coming from, and then exchange in some kind of constructive dialogue. Whereas I mean, majorly in India, those spaces are lacking. That's also one reason why I feel people are not getting to know development sector as they should be. And that's why I think most of us, like at least some of friends that I know, they're not very, aware of what, development sector is, and, what kind of different pathways exist after that. So I think that's also one thing which I have kind of realized. But yeah, I think, maybe yeah, that's the journey that we all kind of took later on. So I think I just had one more kind of thing there, where you just said that you felt this gap of policy and practice, and then you kind of joined APU. It reinforced that idea of yours, and then obviously you kind of started into the sector. But yeah, I'm sure all of us had some kind of assumptions about development sector, that okay, development sector aisa hota hoga, because we have seen it in maybe movies, or have heard from people, or have seen it on social media, something, I'm sure. So what was that first impression which all of us had before joining the development sector? So if we all can kind of share our thoughts, I think that would be lovely. Ekta, Caroline, Diya, anybody?
So Rishabh, when you say impression of the development sector, do you mean once we joined the development sector, or was it like before
No,
we were joining it?
before joining the development sector.
Okay, before joining the development sector. Before joining the development sector, for me, I was like, okay, I want to make an impact for communities in a way that I can see, right? If I'm doing something, and if I'm I don't want to be I don't like using the word empowerment, because that's
Mm,
just I feel like I want to be a tool in the process where they can figure it out themselves. And when I say they, I mean people who are sort of requiring certain means that they otherwise the system is not enabling them with. And if I can be a tool in the process that enables them with that particular means, then my work is done. So I'm just a person in that process. And I think that perspective shift was what made development sector interesting for me, because I realized that you're working with the people in creating solutions. You're not creating solutions for them, right? So the whole idea of having an equal partnership, and at times not even an equal partnership, I take a step back. The people who actually are in the process, who need the help, are doing the decision making. I think that's what like that was the first thing that came to my mind when I was like, okay, this is the space I want to be. I'm making a change, but in a way that is required by the people who want the change. So yeah.
Ekta, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I think very similar to Caroline, but I'd also like to point out, I think I was very naive in the sense that um, that hope and optimism that social change is possible itself is, I think, something that needs to be deconstructed over time. Because to me, thought that oh, you join an organization or a project or something, and once you're a part of it, you're a part of change. And I think it took me quite a few years to kind of decode that things are not this way. And also, what I thought, like when Caroline was speaking about working with communities, right? The assumption usually is that we work bottom up. We work with the communities to co-create solutions or any interventions and address their issues. But in reality, things are very different, which are like a lot of factors are in play when things actually happen on ground. And I think that for me was a new learning, but my assumption was that things are very smooth in general, but they aren't that way.
So one thing which I can find common both you and Caroline's answer is that change or impact is something synonymous to development sector, right? But is this still true? Because I see a lot of folks coming to the sector now because they don't want to do corporate, or simply the other option that they're left with is maybe the development sector, right? Because now if you see a lot of folks after 30s or maybe after 40s, they just want to come into development sector because it's fine, it's like chill that way, not as competitive and fast paced as corporate sector. And now they see that okay, we just want to do something meaningful, so okay, maybe development sector is the answer, right? Because so see, that's something which I've heard a lot of people saying ki change karna, impact karna, and that's why we are just getting into the development sector. But is that the only story that development sector has to sell, or there is something else also that we see in this sector that way? So Diya, Ekta, Caroline, anyone? Because I think that's kind of rhetoric, no? Because everybody's talking about impact change, and interestingly for me, because when I'm listening all of you, I think my belief and story of social sector was really different. For me, it came at a very later stage that okay, this is what development sector is all about. For me, early it was just कि हाँ ठीक है, I don't want to do corporate, so the only option that I'm left with is maybe something which has to do something with social sort of context, but still I didn't have that concrete idea in mind कि हाँ इससे change होगा, impact होगा. And these are all the terms that I came to know about very later in my life, especially in the professional journey that I undertook. So I just want to hear from you guys, because I always see this thing change करना है, बदलाव लाना है, impact लाना है. And I'm not sure how honest or true that is. So yeah,
I'll
Ekta.
just, yeah, I'll quickly add a little bit to that. So it's not only people like in their 30s or 40s who transition, there are also those who are little later in life. And I think from my understanding and the people I've met and observed so far, there are quite a lot of types of people and the thinking that goes behind it. The ones who are at extreme, like very senior, it is also a way to give back to society because all these years you have worked hard and there are people who are
But to whom
loving.
they are giving and how they are giving is also a question, I feel.
Yeah, that is a questionable thing, but it's a human tendency, right? As you're nearing your end, you
Yeah,
want
yeah.
to do good things and get brownie points, right? Everybody has a different philosophy and belief system, but this is like the core of it. The other type of people that I've also seen is um, a lot of people who actually go out of India, live there for a few years, work there for a few years, and then they come back here and then they see, oh my God, why is this not happening in India? ऐसा क्यों नहीं है, ऐसा क्यों है? Like, these existential questions that they have, but they're also in a position, uh, probably because of their education, professional experience, maybe even their privilege or whatever, that they can make that switch and come and problem solve here and innovate for India, right? There's that category of people also. So they didn't grow up with any of this, but suddenly they see a disconnect in life and then they make this like switch. So I think just broadly, there are these kind of people also that exist. Yeah.
Diya?
Yeah.
From
So
tech, sorry. Also, a lot of people who transition from tech to this. And then we have a lot of apps that are now for social change. I don't know how that works, but that exists. Yeah, Caroline.
No, I think Dia was about to say something.
you can go ahead.
Okay, so I think Rishabh, to your point about especially the shift between corporate and getting into the development sector, um, a lot of times when you're in the corporate sector and you see development sector from the outside, you feel like, okay, there are people making an actual impact, doing something good for the society. What am I doing? I'm just like a slave for capitalism. Let me shift to a better space, making the world a better place. But that often comes without knowing the challenges you have within the development sector. Now, as much as it is a great place, if you are in the right place within the development sector to make an impact, it's also a very tricky space, because development sector is also a space that does not have enough funding a lot of times. I'm not saying this is the case with every organization, but a lot of organizations have lack of funding. There are other challenges with respect to resource crunch. A lot of times you will be working for extra hours for a price that you will not be comfortable with. So that's a space you have to sort of get used to. And I'm not saying this is the case in every organization with the development sector, but a lot of organizations face this. So the shift to the development sector, as much as it seems like an easy transition, it's not. It has its own challenges. And a lot of people, when they come into the spaces, when they realize these challenges, and they're like, okay, at least in my corporate life, I had a 9 to 5 job. It was stable. I had whatever weekends off, if you are one of those corporate employees who have the weekend off. But in development sector, that's not the case. A lot of times you have to be flexible because you don't have many people working in the same space. Um, you might not have housing. You might have to figure out, depending on what kind of work you are doing with the development sector. If you're in the rural space, you have to be comfortable with the idea that you might not have water or electricity for the next 2 days, and you have to sort of figure out, plan yourself, and be prepared for it. So it's a different set of challenges that come with the development sector work. Again, within development sector, you have comfortable spaces also. It's not like you're always struggling and toiling hard. uh, but that only you understand that space better only once you're in it. So I think, yeah, that's probably something that needs to be discussed as well in this equation.
So no, I think Ekta also talked about challenges, so we'll come to that. But I think one also interesting part of about development sector is I think that at least for me it was something that I realized later on. So I thought that maybe people around me will accept okay that I've started working in the development sector, but I think there's also a lot of I don't know what's the lighter word for it, but kind of stigma associated with development sector. At least in India, I can see that. So, very often when I speak to my friends or my, people in family, I think I can see that, question in their mind, okay, development sector, but why? And again, for people who are working in law, I can tell you that law firm and litigation are two great professions, right? You can earn money, you can have a great life. So whenever I used to say that, okay, now it has been almost 7, 8 years, so now they have all come to this compromise that okay, but I think the initial phase of it, like a lot of people had this difficulty of understanding that why you're working in development sector. So I think that's also something which a lot of people in India face, at least in the development sector, that why you're working in development sector, and what is what is that one thing which is kind of pushing into it. You can do something better. So I think that, I don't know if you guys have kind of faced that, but yeah, I think for me personally that was also something which I was not expecting. I thought now people are okay with it, but then yeah, later on. And also one funny thing I'll tell you, and then maybe Caroline you can add. So at least in MP and other places where I work, when I say development sector, nobody understands. But when I say NGO sector, they understand. So I think that's also something very funny. I find at times that आप बोलो कि हाँ, I'm working in NGO, then that's fine. But if you say I'm a development practitioner, nobody kind of understands that. So that's also a very kind of funny interactions that I've had in my sort of career so far. So yeah, Caroline, go ahead.
No, Rishabh, I was just about to say what you just said. That is, the first question I got asked was, "What is development? Development what?" are you are you like, when you say, and it's some similar people who ask me, "What is policy? Like a policy agent?" And I'm like, "No, that's not what this means." So I think there is a general misunderstanding of these terms. As someone who works within these spaces, you know that development is not just NGOs, or the fact that policy is not just business, and or policy is not just life insurance policy, right? So there are like different ways. It's just the most commonly perceived understanding of these words, and I absolutely understand that. I just wanted to add that that's a very common misconception and general understanding that people have. I agree.
So before we move into the challenges part of it, so Diya, for you also, because I think all three of us have some kind of fair experience in this sector now because we started early. But for you, like you said that you had this experience of internship and some project at college level, and that's why you decided to shift into the development sector. But I'm sure even for you, it had been some kind of brainstorming and some kind of talking with your own self that okay, whether I'm ready or not ready, and whether should I go into the sector or not. Because I think at that stage, and especially in today's time, a lot of people also influence your decision, especially your friends, and then you see your own sort of people in your network going to some other kind of streams which are much more sort of lucrative that way. So how did you kind of manage that? Because I think that's also an interesting perspective to know for the audience who will be watching this later. Yeah.
Yeah, so as you said, that changing shift from a corporate structure to this sector. So as I mentioned earlier, I had the same thing in mind that I have to go through that corporate ladder and everything. But when I had that experience, like there was in the back of the mind that okay, there is this sector where I can work. I have quite an interest in it. And a lot of my friends, like most of my friends, were like, we have to go through that corporate structure only. And when we used to have these discussions, like in the end of the college time, that where are you applying and everything. So at that time, when I used to say these things that I have to go for this, a lot of maybe I would say contradictory discussions happened that are you mad? Like, are you okay? Why are you going for this? And you've always been like that. You always had to go for the corporate structure. But those discussions actually cleared my mind up and like made the decision for me for this sector when I discussed with them and when I told them that I actually quite changed their mind also that are you comfortable with just being actually a corporate slave and just working under someone and not maybe like you don't even know what you're doing. Like I've seen now my friends who are in corporate, they don't even, I ask them often that what are you working on? And they're just like whatever our superior officers say, we just work on that. Like we don't know who the client is, who the product, what the product is. So I feel that is quite a gap in corporate structure that a person who's working doesn't actually know what they are working on. Like maybe it's on a beginner level, but I've seen that and I didn't want that. I know now that I know what I'm working on, whom I'm working on, what will happen if I do this, like what change I'm making. It's not even a big change. It's not like I'm uh, making lives better here, but still it's somewhere I'm doing and it's satisfying me. So at the end of the day, that is what.
Okay, so Diya is happy working with Tia, I can say that at least.
Yeah.
No, but I think I don't know, maybe for you, Ekta and Caroline, but I think even in development sector, and I think because we've spent some considerable time in this sector now, I mean, I was into full-time work for a very short period of time because then I shifted to my own kind of startup. But even for that shorter period of time, I did feel stuck, and I had that feeling that I'm listening to somebody superior to me just because he was my whatever boss in that hierarchy, and that this feeling of making change was only diminishing throughout that full-time work that I was doing, and I think that was the reason why I shifted to my sort of own startup. And I think I'm not sure how true this is for the social development sector now, that you're actually making that change and you feel empowered about it. I'm not sure, and I think that's also one very interesting insight on the reality versus expectation kind of a thing. So again, that's very personal, right? But still, I think a lot of people have now started realizing that development sector is also getting corporatized to a lot of extent, right? So I'm not sure whether you guys share the same view or not. Ekta, Caroline.
So either they corporatize it too much or they don't do anything about it. I think that's where we are. There are very few organizations, I think, who have struck a good balance, and those who have, I think, are very well known. I think one of the biggest issues and I've also been like, I mean, I've had fantastic experiences. All of it has been a great learning curve. But this feeling of being stuck is actually like, it's very counterproductive, right? Because you come in with so much hope, aspiration, and all of that, and you
And it's also draining, I think, after some point of time starts getting into your head and you start feeling, I think that's also something which I have realized at least.
exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think, people don't understand that see, we have not got into this space because, हमें अच्छा करना है, समाज के लिए कुछ करना है, it's not that. We have made a very, I would say, I would use the word calculated decision because we knew what was at stake. We know the opportunities we have missed out on. We knew right now if any other career path, probably with the same degrees, could have resulted in something much better, at least monetarily. So when we are working for these organizations or with these people, we know that we are like we are passionate about it. We are giving it 100%, but very often because of the limitations that organizations themselves have, biggest one is, of course, funding to stay afloat, because of which a lot of, I think, issues arise. Second is, I think, what I have noticed is also when organizations who get grants or are funded, you constantly have to report and meet those targets, right? Somewhat all the attention shifts to that. So either the organization is constantly putting all effort to get more funding or grants or whatever, or you are just putting a lot of time in delivering on that. What happens in between is that is the challenge where we all face, right? The burnout, the
Interestingly,
stuck
I don't
in.
know if you also came across this LinkedIn post or not, but I think that he's one of the influential leaders in the space. He also posted out the same thing, like how we are actually making the entire development space a target and delivery oriented, right? Because if you're typically asking an organization to deliver like a change, especially in, let's say, education sector or let's say gender sector in like a year or so, I think it becomes really like non-practical, I would say. I think his post was also on the same thing and got a lot of engagement. So I just got reminded of that post. So I'm sure like to a lot of extent now NGOs are running, or the development organizations are running behind those targets to complete and then send the report to funders and donors saying that, okay, we have ticked off these sort of targets. So yeah.
And I think the other broad challenge that I've seen is also the leadership, right? Who are the people who are running these organizations or who are leading these projects or interventions? I think that also matters a lot because, uh, I mean, MBAs are great, right? But you need to also know what's happening on field. And I feel passion and like people have to be equally, you have to be invested in the cause. Again, like you said, right, the whole target and delivery thing might not always work. And social change is tricky, right? You can't copy paste. There is no set formula. What happens in Jharkhand cannot happen in Karnataka. For instance, like you have to like customize things, and every day is a new story, right? And that's where all this working on weekends, going to the field on whatever, like I have friends who are right now up in the Himalayas in like I don't know what -20 degree or whatever. Work has to be done there, right? So I think one of the challenges also that how this clarity of what is being done within organization, how is it formed, how do they strike that balance? Because at the end, I always give this one example that let's say an organization gets I'm just saying 2 crore rupees or something, a grant or funding or whatever, and you want to empower or whatever, let's say 20,000 people in 20 villages. Great. You have the plan, you have everything, money is there. Who is doing this, right? These are probably like a team of 20 people who are sitting in somewhere and doing it. So I'm like, why would you not take care of these 20 people, right? Who are actually ensuring that those 20 villages and 20,000 people and that 2 crore rupees is utilized to its optimum. So I think that's where I'm at. Yeah.
Caroline.
Yeah, I'm gonna take inspiration from what Ekta just said, because I had a very similar idea in my mind, which was when she spoke about not taking care of your employees first, which is such an important thing. Why does social impact has to be at the cost of the well-being of your own employees? What kind of impact are you making through that process? And I think this is something that needs to fundamentally shift, because a lot of the times people are like, you're in the development sector, of course you're going to have challenges, of course you have to face it. Why? Why do you have to put your employees mental and physical well-being at jeopardy for making a bigger social impact? Why can't you ensure that your employees are getting what they need, and you're also making a bigger social impact? The funding is there, it's just a mindset that needs to shift. Social impact is not always about stimulus or relationships and like high pressure, highly intense workload, and you're getting stuff done. That's with any job. Those are challenges that come in different shapes and forms in any job, but you have to understand that this mentality needs to shift. And I think I have realized that over by working in different organizations within development sector, that that's something that just stays. It's a very, you have taken it for granted because you're like, okay, so what's the issue? I can give you an example. I'm not going to quote what, where, but I was in a space where I had just joined this organization, and they work in rural India, and they don't really have a system or like a housing in place for their employees when the employees go for field work. So you stay with the families in the villages, which I am okay with, but there needs to be a structure of some sort. So there was once a time when I had to go to a particular village, and there in that particular community, nobody knows where I'll be staying. Okay, so I'm staying there with my bag, and there's a discussion happening with a bunch of women there. They're like, "Where is she going to stay?" In front of me, and I'm like, "Right, right. We don't know where I'm staying tonight. Great." That kind of anxiety that brings to you. You don't know this village, you don't know anybody in that space, you're all alone. Um, and for me, luckily, language was not an issue, so I understood what they were saying. But there are people who have language issue also. So I'm like, these are like real time challenges. These are things that employees face on a very regular basis. So your organizations just need to be a little more, I feel like, a little more thoughtful about this part of the process as well before you make a larger impact. Because if you're not taking care of your employees are going to leave, the ones who can. There are people who can't, unfortunately, because they don't have the privilege to leave midway. But there are people who will leave midway, and you're just creating an imbalance in the process. So yeah, for me, I feel like when you ask, is development sector making an impact? I would say yes, in the largest sense, there are impacts being made, but at the cost of what? Yeah.
Interesting. So I think now I've been on the other side of the table, so I'll be very careful with the words that I'll choose. But yeah, I mean, on a serious note, I think that's definitely a very valid point, and especially I'll just speak from my personal experience because we are a startup, and I think things are very dynamic, evolving for us. But I do get that point because at times you're at stress, you don't know where the funding will come from, projects are ending, and there are different things that are going on in the background. But yeah, I think the point where you say that okay, you need to take care of your people, you need to stand up for them, and most importantly, you need to be like, you know, very logical and very practical, right? You can't really push them to their limit and say, "Nahi, bhai, because you're working in the development sector, you need to kind of accept it," right? So I think that's something which obviously I was very clear right at the start, but I'm sure it's a learning for me also, and Dia can kind of say more on that, I would say. But yeah, I think that's a very valid point. And from that, one more thing which I had in mind, and I wanted to specifically discuss that, and I think I've always talked about this thing to Ekta very often, I think. So I also have this problem of development sector getting um, too concentrated to some spaces, I would say, because I can see those three, four, five, six selected names, donors, organizations capturing this entire space, right? Because I'll tell this. This is from my personal experience. I know a lot of excellent organizations working in Jharkhand, Uttarakhand. Uttarakhand is a place where I've stayed for a very long period of time. Right? So Jharkhand, Uttarakhand, and there are a lot of states where people are doing excellent work, but I don't see them coming to the spotlight as often as an organization in, let's say, Bangalore or Bombay, right? So that's also something which I feel is very problematic with the development sector, because when I started, I had this thing that okay, and interestingly, we started in Uttarakhand. So I started my development sector from Uttarakhand, and till date, I face the similar challenge because Uttarakhand is not in the priority list of the funders. They don't really care about these small states or the organizations who are present in these small states. Usually, what I've realized is that they go after, the prominent names, or the five, six, seven, eight, nine, 10 names, which Ekta know because I've been secretly bitching about those organizations also somewhere. But yeah, I think that is also one problem with the development sector, because you never expect that, right? And you always feel that okay, maybe you're coming to the development sector and you'll get that treatment, and you can also kind of have the same sort of treatment. But I think that is also something which I have kind of experienced. Ekta?
Yeah, I think yeah, I have a lot of views on controversial views on these topics, but I think very broadly there are two things, right? One is the purely the funder preference, right? If somebody feels for climate, they're going to invest in climate. If somebody feels for Maharashtra, they probably like invest there, right? And I think that is one spectrum. But I think the other also is, which now that I've started thinking about slowly, is there is a very close like pool of organizations, right? Already funders also, but also nonprofits and foundations are working on field, and I think it is a lot to do with like it's very topical, right? So if we see, there was like education, health, climate right now, for example, if we see, um, but I mean, it's a very broad category, right? Within that also, there's a lot happening. But what I've also like started to like, I wouldn't have this perspective until recently, but it's something I've also been thinking about is communications plays a very important role. How you put yourself out there and what you're actually doing on the ground. So I feel if one organization is getting a lot of funding from probably the same pool of funders, I feel they have to be doing something right, right? Because see, at the end, that whole FCRA discussion is there. Um, there are quality checks. It's not like you can't be getting just like free ka paisa for a long time. You at some point someone is going to call it out, because if things don't work, everybody, because it's very common, right? You put logos everywhere of whatever whoever is doing the project and everything. So it's not a hidden thing, especially if you're working with communities. So I just feel it's more about also how you sell yourself, and this the whole corporatization thing also comes into this picture, right? How are you like internally when we talk in organizations, if you hear there's a marketing team, there are branding discussions happening, there is like, and there are points where I'm like, like, and this is because I've been speaking to so many friends also about it, my batchmates and like colleagues, former colleagues. It feels like a corporate. That field trip will happen once a year when you go to see, but what happens the remaining 11 months is like, it just feels like that. So I think, and there is a lot of, so actually, in the US, if I'm not wrong, there's an organization called Fund the People, if I'm not wrong. They actually work and ensure that like donors and all of them kind of are investing in people, in organizations, but also that culture changes. Because I think it's a lot to do with culture and like how, like Caroline was saying, right? That mind shift change has to be there. Money is there, intent is there, all that is there. But that small nudge is needed. So I feel that's where my, I think, broad views are on this.
Yeah, I agree with what Ekta was saying. And again, I guess the only thing I would add is a lot of times it is also about familiarity with organizations, because if I know this organization, or my colleague who has already worked in another space knows this organization, they have done excellent work before. As a person at management role, I don't have to think too much. I can just be like, "ठीक they have done this before, they know what they're doing, let's go with it." The same thing comes when you have research funding proposals, where you have people who know how to write, and these are the people who are excellent at, they if they've got funding from my organization before, they know what works and what doesn't. So when you're writing for a grants or a contributions program, you already know what will work for you. So when I've been on the other side also, where I was part of a team that had to look into project proposals for to give them funding. So one of the things that we were told before we were doing this process was just to make sure that there are going to be organizations who have got contributions funding in the last 2 years. So just make sure that they are not getting it this year just because they have done it before, but because they're really good at what they're proposing. Because there are new organizations who are also asking for a funding proposal. So when you compare the new ones with the old ones, you see a significant difference, because the new ones are just starting out, right? So there is a lot of gap in their research proposals. They don't know what they're asking. There's a lack of clarity in some parts. But on the other side, the experienced ones, because they know what they need and they already got funding before, they know what are the boxes that needs to be checked. So technically, if I have to compare, I will see the person who is more experienced, because they've done all the things that are required, right? Unless and until that the funding, the program, or like the proposal in itself has some sort of an issue. Otherwise, in terms of technicalities, they're checking all the boxes. So it's fair to give them the funding that they require, because they're on paper they are fulfilling all the needs of the contributions program. So I'm just saying, like, this is an example of it's not always biased. It's not that people want to, like, oh, always favor people with familiarity and experience, but it's also because they have experience, they get those funding. Now, the other thing that Rishabh was talking about was like smaller organizations not getting the traction that they should, because of the work they are doing, especially in smaller states. I think it also comes down to networking. Um, Unfortunately, it's a very systemic bias, but when you are a smaller organization, your networks, unless you have someone in your team that has come off from a bigger organization that has the network to bring to you, but otherwise smaller organizations also lack networking, which is a systemic issue. So tomorrow, if we plan to create like some sort of a database where people can connect with each other, if somebody thinks about it in that sense, maybe yes, these organizations can be brought forth, considering that they are doing really excellent work. Because Rishabh, I agree with you. I know a lot of my friends who work in smaller organizations in smaller cities and towns, but they're doing excellent job to that community that they're working with. But they're not necessarily the people who come in news. So they sort of systemically get stripped away from the resources and money that could come their way. So yes, I agree.
No, so on that, Caroline, I think also in India, now a lot of organizations have started setting up these philanthropic networks and grant uh, pipelines, networks, and things like that. And I think I've been part of some of them. So still, I feel that's where even what Ekta was trying to say, the culture shift, in the sense like even if you're creating some kind of a network or a group how inclusive that is, right? What kind of organizations you're letting in and exploiting those resources which you have, right? And how often are you kind of interested in interacting with these groups who are situated in some other smaller regions, perhaps, right? So I think that shift, I'm not sure if that has happened to that extent in India, to say for that matter. But yeah, I mean, slowly things are moving in that direction because I can see a lot of organizations coming together to create platforms and different pipelines. But yeah, I mean, still, it's a challenge for small organizations, I would say, especially for the startups who kind of don't fall into that category of hardcore grassroots kind of a thing, and then they're also somewhere in the middle. So I think it is definitely a challenge. So I think as we have just 10 minutes left, so we'll have to kind of wrap this up. So let me ask this very interesting question, which I've been thinking about. So one good thing that you like about social sector, and then one thing which you would like to change if you're given that power. So maybe we can start from Diya, Caroline, and then Ekta.
Okay, so I was not expecting that we'll start from me, but because I have like the shortest experience in this sector. So one thing that I like is that it's maybe it's like working in TA, or maybe it's the sector that like I am some like I have a voice in this sector. Like whatever I think should be there, it is there. Maybe it's like a TA thing or it's the sector thing because this is my first experience. So
Because of TA, Diya.
so that is what I like, and that is what I'm looking around at people, and I'm like noticing about their work culture, that they are a nobody in their organization. And it's not true in my case. Like when I think there is something that we can implement, we get that done in any project, or it's like an organization, it's anything. And one thing that I would like to change, I'm not very clear about because frankly, I don't know this sector that much that I'm going to change anything about it. So yeah, I can't answer that.
Yeah. So Caroline.
I think the good thing about this sector is hope and optimism to change and make a social impact in our best capacity, right? I think that's something that's often overlooked because we don't see it. But like if you're coming somewhere, if you're someone who's coming from a corporate setup or like a very difficult environment, hope and optimism is not very, it's not every day that you use them, it's not every day that you truly believe in what you're doing. And I think this sector does give you that as much as it challenges you. But I've always felt that I've been surrounded with people who actually believe in the cause that they're working for. So I think that's one good thing about the sector to keep you going. The challenge or like a change that I would like to address, a challenge that I would like to address and would love to have some sort of a change in that is what I was talking about earlier, which is social impact does not have to be at the cost of the mental and physical well-being of the person or the employees that you are employing. So a development practitioner does not have to make an impact while putting their life in jeopardy. So I think that mental, like that mind shift needs to take place in the sector for sure.
So, for me, I think one good thing about the social sector very broadly is I think it is fulfilling. I feel like I very strongly feel, at least that the work I'm doing, I'm only adding more to existing um, rather than kind of negatively impacting or causing like my what I'm doing, my work doesn't have any negative consequences on the people I'm working with, right? Or the communities I'm working with. And I think that sense of fulfillment is what I think drives me to be in this space. Because there are other, I think, jobs where I mean, a lot of professions actually, I mean, while you might not exploit at the larger scheme of things, those professions end up being exploitative or whatever of other communities. One thing that I would like to change, absolutely, of course, plus one with Caroline on what she said. That would be my number one. But just to put another thing, um, I think in the when a lot of funding comes to organizations, whether small or big, across whatever thematic areas they work on, usually is just a money transaction. So after these like whatever proposals are vetted, the money is given, and then you just keep giving reports. But I feel what happens during this time, other than like having negative impact on the employees and all of that, I feel the organizations get so involved into making this grant and everything come to life that they forget about their own growth. So the moment that grant is like finishes, right, or the funder is gone, suddenly you're back to square one, right? So in that way, I feel that the donor has not helped in nurturing the organization, right? You leave them hanging, and that's when many of these fantastic organizations and projects actually just tank because there was no support. And I feel this is one space, especially like a lot of philanthropies and foundations who are now like in India, uh, I mean, supporting so many organizations. I feel they should think about them because they are in a position to do these little changes. It doesn't take much, but I feel that is one thing that should change.
Excellent, great. So I think we're almost like closer to our time now because initially the and I had thought of keeping it to
But
40.
Rishabh, what about you? You also need to share.
One thing, I think I agree with Dia because I think the sector has always given us the space to kind of think and contribute to the ideas that we believe in. Definitely, yes. One thing that I would like to change is to make the sector more transparent, to make it more democratic that way. Because fortunately, I have always worked in the smaller cities of the country, and maybe from that perspective, I still feel that funding, the leaders, the way donor networks they work, they're very I would say um, uh, uh, very linear that way, right? So I think that's one thing that I would like to kind of change. But yeah, the list is long, so maybe that's one thing that I would like to change. So excellent. So I hope. I mean, for me, I'm saying I'll continue in the sector for the next many years. I feel. I don't know about you guys. Diya, I don't know. But for me, I think I'll continue working because now अब तो कहीं मेरा कहीं हो भी नहीं सकता. I think I'm crossing whatever 7-8 years of my work experience, so I don't have any hopes left कि अब मुझे corporate वाले तो लेने से रहे. So I think I'll continue in the development sector. But yeah, I mean, on a serious note, I think this is one place where I always feel good and I feel I can do some kind of positive impact. And I think that's also the reason why we've started our own kind of initiative. So yeah, Ekta, what about you? Are you going to continue?
Yeah, yeah, I'm in here for the long game.
Great, great, great. Cool. So thanks, Caroline, Ekta, for joining us tonight. I think Diya and I were really nervous because this was the first episode that we're shooting or recording, maybe for that matter, and we didn't know how it will go. But I'm assuming that it went well, and you both have enjoyed on the show tonight. So thanks again, and we'll be in touch, and hopefully we'll keep trying our bit and making the sector a better place for people like Dia who will be joining us in the coming few years. So thanks again, Ekta and Caroline, and see you soon. Yeah,
Thank you and all the best for the podcast.
no worries.
Yeah.
Bye.
Well,
Bye.
thanks, Rishabh. Thanks, Divya. Bye.
Thanks. Okay. Bye bye. It was great talking to you. And it was a great podcast. First episode, actually. It went really well, according to me. I don't know about you guys.
उसको बोलना पड़ेगा दिया को ये चीज.
नहीं नहीं लेकिन even I hope we were able to answer some of the questions in the way that would help others, and I hope that this is like a great initiative, because I wish I had something like this I could listen to when I was starting, and I'm hoping that conversations like this would initiate more conversations into these topics that are important but they don't get talked often. So yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.